hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome back to another edition of your favorite podcast, Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias with Mike Pinelli and Christy Casciano-Burns. Our guest today, Riley Cote, was an undrafted player who walked on to an NHL tryout, which resulted in him taking the full road from the CHL to the ECHL to the AHL and eventually the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers, where he became a hometown favorite almost immediately. Following his 8-year pro career, Riley has committed his life to self-care, mindfulness, and personal development as a mindfulness teacher, psychedelic integration coach, and creative entrepreneur. Riley is very active in the Flyers Learn to Play program and hosts the very popular Nasty Knuckles podcast with longtime friend and equipment manager Derek Settlemyer. This is going to be a rich episode. Riley, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure.
It's our pleasure to have you, buddy. We always love talking to people who have not just made the league, but have dedicated their life to mental health, mental fitness, and we think that that's a great circle right back to our audience with the parents, because we can share these messages now that kind of make this go full circle. But before we get into that, Riley, why don't you tell us about your youth minor hockey journey? How did you get into the game, and how did you navigate it to professional hockey?
Yeah, great question. Just grew up in the middle of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Obviously, hockey culture up in Canada. My parents were season ticket holders for the Winnipeg Jets. They had passion for hockey and introduced me to the game. You know, as early as I can remember, going to games, getting me skates and a stick, playing on the pond, playing on the street. So, as long as I can remember, I really can't remember my childhood without hockey. And then, as I showed that I was interested in it and showed that I loved to go to the rink and play the game, they just supported me as much as they could, and grew up playing in Winnipeg, all my youth hockey, just different levels, obviously working up the ranks. And I landed up being I guess you could say for my age group, a big fish in a small pond, right? I mean, Winnipeg's not the hugest city, and it's just one of many cities in Canada. So you can imagine the talent pool expands outside of, your immediate, your home base there. So I moved away from home when I was 16 years old to play in the Western Hockey League, but everything was in Winnipeg. Just loved hockey. Parents, obviously, like every other hockey parent, waking up at the crack of dawn and carting you around, and here and there and everywhere, and just all I can remember from my parents is just supporting me as much as they could, and just reminding me to have a good attitude and bring the effort. And as long as I do that, they'll support me. And that's kind of the short version of it, but enjoyed it. I mean, I can still remember a good chunk of it, and it was those times of your life where there's really no worries, right? I mean, you're just having fun, you're playing the game that you love, and it really is that. There's no attachment to anything else beyond just the fact that you love it and it brings you joy.
I'll say
it's changed, hasn't it, Riley?
It changes. Yeah, it changes for sure. And quickly, and it seems like it's changing quicker for younger players earlier now, because there's so much pressure.
Right.
And there's so much desire to be elite, and you have to choose to be elite. It's almost like gymnastics. I see this with my two girls. It's like you have to choose to be in gymnastics at 4 years old to give yourself a standing chance to ever be competitive. You see this with hockey now, where it's like you almost have to make a decision really early if you're gonna take this seriously and try and be competitive, because if you miss those first few years of hockey in that window, the amount of training that goes into it, such an early age, the amount of skills and ice time, it's almost like you'd be left behind. Not saying that you can't, but it's crazy how early.
I don't know about you, but that kind of makes me sad, because
it's sad.
I think our kids are really missing the important element of what my kids got to experience and you got to experience too, of just the pure joy,
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think we have the ability to create some separation here too, right? I mean, not every hockey player needs to play elite hockey, right? Right. I mean, all roads lead to men's league, and the guys are still playing it, love it, right? So you can still play hockey, and this is what I'm actually trying to do, in my neck of the woods here in the Westchester, Chadds Ford area is make it okay to play hockey just because you love to play hockey, with no pressure to do anything with it besides just showing up at the rink and just having fun with it. You're right. Who says that you have to play Division I hockey or pro hockey? I mean, the reality is it's an amazing sport, but I think it gets tainted once you start having these pressures and these fear bodies and these crazy, these crazy energies into it, because the reality is a lot of these kids might not even want to, but their mom and dad might want them to. And this is where the unhealthiness comes in it.
Yeah, you're bringing up a funny point, and I wanted to share this with all three of you here. And Mike and Christy, you'll laugh at this too. So Riley, I've benefited greatly from this show, having the youngest kids. It's been a training for me, if you will. And we had games over the weekend, and you just mentioned the parents. A lot of them were, little anxiety about the games, and I was smiling. They go, "What are you so excited about?" And I said to them, and I swear to you, this is true. I said, "My son woke me up today for the first time and said, 'We've got a game.'" Like, I didn't have to go into his room. He wanted to go. He woke me up and said, "Dad, it's time to go." That the weekend was a win at that point. Not that it was a fight or anything before, but I said, "Wow, something's clicked here that he's waking me up." That's what excites me. The outcome of the games is, not irrelevant, but that wasn't the focus for me this weekend. And I wanted to turn it to that because I think, Riley, you mentioned a really important point. Is a lot of the pressure comes from us as parents, because we fall into this trap that you're talking about as well. If you got to get to the elite or you got to get to the best, it is so okay if your kid just wants to skate and just have fun. And whether they're AAA down to B or even a rec league, there's no right or wrong way to play the game as long as you're enjoying the game.
Yeah, I think that's an important message. It's a hard one for people to understand, because we live in a culture that's so success oriented, right? Like, you can't just do something for fun, because that would be crazy, right? You have to do it for another reason, which would in this case be chasing something, whether it's money or or success, because that's the way you view it. But I have a different position on it than you kind of used to, because I was living in this bubble thinking that, well, why the hell would you play a sport if you weren't serious about it, right? If you didn't want to compete at the highest level. But I've learned, and excuse my ignorance, back in the day, it was just like I just lived in a bubble, and now I see it for what it is. It's like, this is an amazing game. And I see, I do work with special hockey and military veterans, through the Warriors program, and like all walks of life. And it's like, what's unique about it is that it brings these people,
brings them joy.
Oh,
we lost you there for a minute. It's okay. We lost you right at it brings them joy. So if you just pick up right by saying it brings them joy,
it brings them joy to show up at the rink and be around a team and play hockey for that, for that joy that they remember, the reason why they play the game in the first place. There's a camaraderie, and then there's this element of team building, and the collective unit, and there's a lot of things that are metaphors for life there. But what's the same, no matter what population you're talking about, is like they love it, they enjoy it, and there's no other reason that they play it besides that. They're not getting paid. They're not just to come to the rink and have fun and be around the guys or the girls, depending on who we're talking to, and just do it because it's an enjoyable thing to do. There's no expectation beyond that. And I think it's an important lesson, because most people hang their hat on, like, we have to do this for this exact reason of going the highest possible direction we can with the sport.
The paradox of it is that, Christy, Mike, we've never interviewed any NHL player on this show that was like, "Man, I hate hockey. I just hated this, and it was the worst thing ever, and I got lucky." Look, I know there are some players that get to a very high level that are not mentally what I'm talking about, but it's the minority, right, Riley? I mean, like, you got to love the game to even think about going to an elite level. If it's a stress-filled ball of anxiety, that's not good for your life. It's not good for your game. It's not going to play out right.
Yep, you're 100% right. But I can remember a time where that shift did happen, where I started to realize it was affecting me in an unhealthy way, where I went from playing this because I just loved it and there was nothing else to think about besides showing up at the rink and having fun, to all of a sudden it's like, double A to triple A. Now it's like triple A travel. Now we're cruising around the province, and now you got harder coaches that are, now benching you when you're not, making the right, all of a sudden it's like the pressure's on. It's like, well, I remember a few times I'd be like, is this really what I want to do? Is this the way it's supposed to be? Because you don't know any other way, right? I mean, you're living in this bubble, and this is the way it is. I've been moving away from juniors.
What age what age were you? Just so we can kind of figure out the timeline here that you're talking about.
I
When
think
you
probably
started feeling-
14, 15, and going to
Okay.
these out of state, out of province hockey camps, week long hockey camps, and it's a grind, and it's like, well, now all of a sudden it's like starting to feel like a business without even understanding the business element of it. Started just being like a lot more pressure than I remember. I remember just like, there was no training growing up. It was just like pond hockey. Just go and play, put your sticks in the middle and pick teams, right? It was just like, it was just like this, free way of just being, right? I think that was why most people are attracted to hockey, especially at a young age, is that there's this element of freedom that comes along with it. It's read and react, right? It's a creative sport, creative self-expression, and you get out there and you just kind of flow and do what you want to do, and you don't have anybody yelling at you and telling you don't do it that way. There's enough people in the world, and there's enough industries in the world that do that, right? And then all of a sudden you get to a point where it becomes that, and then you have to have the mental fortitude to be able to either adapt to that or bow out of it and just play hockey for fun, which is a hard thing to do because it's not really, saying I want to play hockey for fun doesn't seem like it's a thing, at least at younger ages anyways.
I had the question written down, and I'll throw it to you right after, Mike. What would you say to 14-year-old you or 15-year-old you now, knowing what you know? And again, you're kind of talking to the kids that listen to the show right now, right? Because look, we always have 2020 perspective looking back, but what would you tell yourself at that age today?
Well, I think it goes back to the question of why, right? Always asking the question of why. Why are you doing this? And that goes across the board for anything. Like, why are you showing up and playing hockey? And if the question is because I want to be an NHL player, that's great. But the answer should have some version of like, because I love it. If you don't love it, and there's other reasons, it's not if it's because your mom said so, I would say you might want to rethink what you're doing. But if it is because, I think one of the first ones has to be you love it, you really enjoy it, it brings you some level of happiness. Because if it's not doing that, I don't know what you're doing. You could have all these dreams, but if there's no passion there, you're not going to find those dreams because you can't make it without the passion. So if it doesn't fire you up,
I wonder if that's a question we should be asking our kids. You know what I mean? From time to time, like, and not in the leading way of, hey, are you still having fun? Because the answer is just going to be yes. It's, hey, what's your why? Why are we doing this? Why do we do this each season? Let them answer that question. Mike, I did cut you off. I apologize.
No.
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, Riley. No, I mean, I don't know. So what we talk about all the time, and what sounds like you're hitting on, right, is all the work you do outside of the elite athlete. Like you're working with genuinely people who love to play the game for the fact that it's a game. And I think as a culture of hockey, USA Hockey, the NHL, the people that are contributing the money and the funding and the resources for hockey to exist have really done such a disservice to the fan, to the kid who just likes to want to play hockey, because we're eliminating all those opportunities for these kids. I work with American Special Hockey all the time. I cannot find ice for them other than 5:30 in the morning and 10:45 at night, because everybody's like, no, we got a 12U practice at 6:00. Well, when are you going to give opportunity to these different communities to enjoy the sport? And ultimately, I think it falls on the governing bodies and the organizations within our ecosystem of hockey to say, listen, we've got to create these spaces for kids not to think that the only way to play hockey is to get in a car, travel to another state, play in a weekend of tournaments, and that's fun. Because I think if we reverse engineer this a little bit, and you've hit it on it multiple times, if you're not playing for fun, I just don't see. I don't see that joy. I don't see that. I don't see that fun. Like, I don't see Lee's son waking him up in the morning saying, "Let's get in the car. We got to go gas it up and go get to the Hilton as quick as we can, so we could go play somebody else in a different state." Like, I just think the fun as we take it out of it, and you as a player growing up, you're having fun because you just were in a fun atmosphere. Nobody told you weren't allowed to go on the pond. Nobody told you weren't allowed to go play street hockey. Nobody told you can just go out and have fun for your friends, or you had to skip. You had to go to training and skip the fun piece. And we hear that. Lee just said it. I mean, we hear it out of every NHL player we talk to. every PWHL player we talk to, every high level athlete that we speak with, but is all about the fun piece. But everything we do takes fun away.
So,
And I'm just wondering, where is that? How do you fix that? Like, how do you, or what are you doing to combat that, I guess?
yeah, you know what? It's a great question. And I got a unique opportunity in the Philly area with Philadelphia Hockey Academy and Total Package Hockey, which is another, hockey academy, where I'm able to teach mindfulness through the academy. And there's a couple reasons why it's a good fit. One is because I'm not dealing with their respective teams, right? And the politics that have anything to do with them. It's really them as a human, and them as, a human that loves hockey, that they're actually going to school in an environment that supports, their dreams in some way, shape, or form. But I'm able to ask these questions around the why, and ask these harder questions, but also bring some, some realism to, to the space, and bring some realism to the adversity that they are probably already are aware of, but that the adversity comes along with being an athlete or pursuing to be an athlete, and then making the parallels to life, So I'm able to kind of you take two of my favorite things in life, which is, hockey, which is a sport I, grew up playing, and, this world of mindfulness and teaching not just youth, but adults as well. But just bringing a level of awareness around, their thinking, their bodies, right? Another thing we could get into is just the unhealthiness of how we just reduce our being to just being a hockey player. And I was guilty for it too. And to a fault. And some people would argue, be like, you need to embody that fully to ever give yourself a standing chance to be a, professional or highly successful individual in whatever art your craft you're in. But I also see the unhealthiness in it, where you think you are that, like I thought I was a hockey player, meaning like that's who I was as the core of my, my character. I was a hockey player, and then I was a hockey fighter, until I was no longer either of those. And then I had to look myself in the mirror and like, who the hell are you? Right. So I've just spent the last, 24 years of my life embodying this sport to the point where it actually consumed me. And then getting into fighting because I wanted it so bad, and all this unhealthiness that come along with it, because the pressures that I put on myself, probably the most, it was myself, right? These pressures that I, letting my parents down, this and that, letting whoever down, letting myself down, the fear bodies. So I get an opportunity to kind of talk to these experiences that I had, and bring some, some realism to their current situations, where separating the human from the athlete. And if you pour in more into the human and fill up that toolbox, more mindfulness, tapping into breathing as a superpower, gratitude, little, maybe just treating the body, in a little more gentle way, instead of overtraining the body, and just looking at the two sides of the coin here. And obviously, naturally, that spills over into hockey performance, if that's what you want to do, and actually what you're where your heart is. But if it's just because you love to play hockey, go to a hockey academy, doesn't mean that you're necessarily buying into the idea that you want to become pro. Most of these guys probably do at this point, because why else would you sign up for a hockey academy if your heart wasn't in it? But so I get an opportunity to kind of bring some healthiness into it, because the mental health crisis is bad enough as it is. Then all of a sudden you got parents pressuring their kids, and a lot of unhealthiness that goes into the sport, when the sport, again, to all the stuff we're talking about, should be something enjoyable for them. If you take away that joy, with politics and unhealthiness and body shaming and this shaming and that shaming, it gets bad real quickly. And toxic kids can be sometimes when they're not in a position to self-regulate, and they get frustrated. Well, they just spew their venom on other kids, and they're mean, and you know what I mean? And it's just this culture of unhealthiness that just keeps kind of, recreating itself in different forms. So I got an opportunity now to, at least the way I see it, in a small little area, with a couple groups, to be able to prove the concept of we can do both. We can actually train hockey players, in that world of performance, but we can also, not ignore the fact that these are human beings that need to be taught how to self-regulate and how to focus their mind and concentrate and be more mindful of their bodies, and where they fit in and all this stuff. It's just a different level of awareness. You can have both. It doesn't have to pick one or the other.
Riley, I wonder if you could take a moment for those who might not be familiar with mindfulness. What is it, and how early do you introduce it to your child? And what are some simple ways you can do that every day in life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think this interfaces to everything we do. It's not, it's not just hockey; it's everything. It's just, I think it would just sum it up to, the mental state of being present, right? I mean, it's presence, and when we're present, we're in creative flow, and I think that's why, if you talk about hockey or creative sports, that's why kids are attracted to them without even knowing it. It's in a creative expression. They get to take the puck and they get to dangle. They get to try whatever they want with that ultimate freedom, but they're present in that moment. When they get the puck, they're not thinking about tomorrow's homework or yesterday's, grounding. They're in the moment. They're enjoying it. And I think we could take that analogy and apply it to everything we do. It's like, okay, now we're off the ice in the locker room. Can we be more present while we're taking our first skates? Or now we're worrying again. Are we back to worrying, and are we back into depression? The mind is an active, very active thing, and we're trying to reel in the mind and taking that, just applying it throughout the day, throughout our lives, right? It's like just a little bit more awareness. Oh, I'm talking to myself a little bit more negatively now. Could we shift that and be a little more present with our thoughts and our self-talk, reframe, so we can now start telling ourselves positives, oh, we did great last night, or we worked really hard and I had a really good attitude, and this positive self affirmations. You can extend that to all of this stuff, being a little bit more mindful about our body. Oh, our body's sore. Maybe we don't need to go grind today. Maybe we need to rest and recover. So it's like all these different things that just take a moment to tune into, but there's like hyper awareness there. It's, oh, geez, like I'm feeling a certain way. Maybe I shouldn't be around that person, or maybe he's not making me feel a certain way, or maybe I'm not making myself feel a certain way. So I know it's a little bit, it's a little bit much to explain, and it sounds like a lot, and it is, because it's a practice. And I think that's, taking it beyond, the hockey practice or strength and conditioning. It's like, oh, we have another practice. We have a practice, and we have the responsibility to be in control of our thinking. Because if we don't control our thinking, we don't control our emotions. And that's, the crazy world we're living in. It's like the thoughts are all over the place, and you can see it in the crazy violent world we're living in, as people are expressing in very negative ways, and this happens in hockey. You come to the bench, you made a bad pass. Who cares? Well, smash your stick, swear 1,000 times, yell at the coach. Like, is that necessary? Is it? I don't know. Probably not. No, I coached pro hockey too. And we didn't like to see that, because that was showing that you didn't have the ability to self-regulate. And, these are important things, because the best players in any sport or in any walks of life have composure, right? You have composure with the puck. We're not panicking. We're not freaking out. So it extends to not just beyond the mind, it's the emotional body. It's how we react in the world. How reactive are we to adversity and stress? And then they take it outside of the locker room, out of hockey in general. It's like we go to school, or we go here and go there. It's like, I would like to think that what we learn there or teach there can apply to, being in a parking lot where someone cuts you off. Are we going to snap and, freak out and throw stuff at them? Or, you know what I mean? Just like maybe have acceptance for them. Maybe they're just, having a bad day. They're human, right? We all are human, and, trying to navigate this crazy world. So a little bit long-winded, but it's like such a big topic, because it interfaces with everything we do. If we're not mindful, we're mindless, and I was, like most people, I was like that too, mindlessly kind of cruising through life, thinking that I got to chase this and chase that to show the world that I'm successful. And it's really not about that, and it just takes away a lot of the pressure when you start thinking a little bit differently,
What's funny about consciousness, present moment awareness, mindfulness, Riley, is that Christy had asked, too, like, well, when can you start? How do you know to do it? The younger you start, the better. And I actually find that the children that I work with, especially the young ones, have a much easier time with this than adults. And look, the short term is there's just not a lot of baggage there yet. I don't like to use that term, but they haven't lived that much. It is, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned this because my daughter was in the car the other day. She's 8. And she said, Daddy, what's consciousness? Because I talk about it a lot. And I'm sitting there suddenly like, how do you explain consciousness to an 8-year-old? And I basically said to her, kind of what you said, is that, look, it's about being present. And I explain to her that the past has happened already. The future hasn't happened yet, but your life is taking place right now. And that's true all of the time. But I also say that your mind is wired to wander to the future and the past. It's a defense mechanism, and it's okay to go there sometimes as long as you can bring yourself back. And then this brings me to kind of the point I'm trying to make is, you said this right. You got to practice. And that's where I think people miss this of, well, how do I do that? You've got to practice. And it's not just the kids, my friends. It's all of us. You got to practice. You got to be patient with your practice of this present moment stuff. And then you got to not judge yourself too much when things don't go perfectly, right? If you get a little road rage, it happens to all of us. It's okay. Just bring yourself back to the present moment, right? The kids, the adults, and everyone and everything in between that cannot bring themselves back, they're not practicing this, and that leads to trouble, right? So we start as young as 8 years old, training kids, present moment awareness, and it can be as simple as 15 seconds of just listen for the farthest away sound you can hear, listen to the closest sound you can hear. Those reps build up, and what I've always been amazed about, Riley, is that, after 3 or 4 months of this, you'll see them start doing it on the bench without any prompting.
You're right.
Instead of breaking their stick, it'll freak coaches out sometime when the kid's kind of there with his eyes closed or her eyes closed, listening. But you teach them young, and then now they take this with them for a lot of their life. So I always say we have to start even younger than people think. That doesn't mean we're not going to help anyone older than 8.
Right.
But that's the starting point, right? And coaches, parents, if you don't know, quote unquote, how to do this, go online, man. Look at Riley's stuff. There's so much information out there, and there's so many people sharing this information. You have access to it, but you got to kind of take the time to look into it and practice it yourself, right? So anyway, now I'm being long-winded, but yeah,
no, that's a good point to bring in the parents, because we've all seen the reactions in the stands with parents when things don't go the way they want to, right. Or, the ref makes a call and tempers flare. And I've seen fights in the stands with parents getting ejected because they're so hot-headed and their mouths can't stop. So important for parents to practice the mindfulness too. Exactly what Riley was saying.
Probably more important, honestly, because they're around their parents more than they are their team and right. Their environment. And if the mom and dad are stressed out and don't have the ability to self-regulate, like that energy just gets passed down to the child. So then the child right. goes to the rink, and he might work on mindfulness for an hour. But if 23 of your hours is not mindfulness and is right. stress and chaos, well, it generally works out the other way. But the parents need it, to me, probably the most, because they're stressed. They got, they're trying to pay the bills and cart their kids around, and a lot of times overreactive, and they're a lot of times trying to live vicariously through their children. And they think that, like, by forcing their kid to do this or doing this and giving them crap after their games, that's actually helping them. And the way I see it, it's not. In fact, it's probably pushing the child away from it. And then, getting into altercations in the stands is just it's just craziness. Like, I mean, I could go on for days on that whole piece, but but the parents.
It's not this audience. Don't worry.
Yeah. I think it needs to come from the top down, and reminders, coaches reminders, parents reminders, just all reminders. They're planting seeds, right? And just keep watering them.
So I think the way I'm hearing this is like, why aren't we doing this? Like to me, like if we sat in a coaches meeting in the beginning of the year for parents, I said, okay, we got to work on a shooting coach. We have a power skating program. We have a defensive specialist. Everybody gets a goalie coach. We even, maybe I think a lot of pros even talk a little bit about nutrition and maybe a little bit more in depth than we used to. But nobody is saying, but where are we carving out time for the mental piece of the game for all of us, the coach, the trilogy, right? The coach, the parent, and the player. And not at pro hockey, but maybe you could talk about, like, what's a good starting point then for us as coaches and parents, people working with kids, that makes it as important, or build it into our curriculum where we would have the same urgency to make sure we have a power skating coach every week. Like, what can we do in small bites, to get to where what you're doing right now, working with teams and individuals and players? Like, how can we get to that point without having to reinvent the whole program and have some kind of crazy budget to do this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, it starts with awareness. The fact that you're asking the question and seeing that there's a need for it is a starting point, right? I think there's a lot of people in the hockey world that don't even think that this is a thing yet, or it's like they don't see the value of it. And trust me, I've spent the last few years kind of banging down some of these doors and trying to bring some awareness to it. And I think it's just not. It was what hasn't been sexy enough for a lot of people to to get behind, because skills on the ice is sexy, right? Strength and conditioning and lifting weights, like there's visible results there, right? Like immediate visible results. You can see, in a couple of weeks that you can improve certain things. But the parents can see that it's very tangible. You get into the mental health stuff, and you get into the mindset stuff. It's a different animal. You could appear to be doing a lot of work, when you're, in the mindfulness world, but for someone that doesn't understand, an outsider looking in, you'd be like, well, what are you guys doing, and why are you doing that? And is this gonna bring more results on the ice? And you can show them all the data to support it, but if the person doesn't understand it, like if there's ignorance, there's usually not really good understanding there, right? Because you just, like, I've been called a lot of different cuckoo names before, right? Because I'm thinking outside the box for a lot of these things that I'm involved in. But they keep proving to be true, and it's like, well, not that this is about like being right or wrong, but it's like if you're ignorant to an idea, naturally your position would be not to try and understand it anymore. You're just going to do what you do and what which is like, let's go back on the ice and bag skate. Like, you think of like the evolution of some of this stuff, the training and the philosophies and work versus recovery, and you go from the 70s, Broad Street bullies, to like the era we're living in now, and from drinking beers to archaic recovery to, or a lack of recovery, to the emphasis on this now. We're at a pivotal point in human history, let alone sports, where like these conversations are actually being had. So I would say, like, you need someone at in the higher level of the organization to believe in the idea. It took me 2 years to get one of these hockey academies to believe in the idea, until another hockey academy comes in and sees what I'm doing, instantly loves it. So, essentially we signed today. The other one sees me doing it with the other one, and all of a sudden now they want to do it because now they see the value in it. But like the reality is like they're just like crunching numbers, and is this going to generate revenue and blah blah blah. Like, not even thinking about, is this going to actually improve the child's mental health? You know what I mean? It's like these, this is the corporation, that the corporate thinking versus, like, we're not just just a bunch of animals in the meat factory. Like, these are human beings, and if you can do both. You can make money and actually support these children's mental health, but you need someone to believe in the idea.
Well, if you're
retaining
more kids and your kid. If
Right.
you're retaining more kids and your kids are healthier, you're going to make money. I mean,
Totally.
So if it's purely money, like I say this all the time, like if you wanted everything you want to do to make more money if your only goal, you didn't care about development, you didn't care about if your kids went anywhere, you don't care if your only goal was to make more money, then what we're doing now would not be the way to do it. It would be what you're saying. It'd be to bring more kids in, give more kids opportunity, create more, recreational programming. When you play AAA hockey, you don't have no money. Like, you don't need more money to spend. Like there's no growth. Like, so to me, that's where, if you want the longest term investment for your kid, then maybe this is where you invest your money.
Right.
And the rest will take care of itself. Because if your kids quit at 15 because they just can't stand walking into a rink, then what the heck is the ROI that you're even looking for anyway with your 8-year-old? Like, it's so foreign to me. And maybe that's why we're having this discussion, right? Because more of these parents have to get in and go, what the hell am I doing if my main goal is I want my kid to play pro hockey? Okay, then this is probably pretty important, because we're seeing it more and more. Like, we never, listen, when you were playing, right, we never heard about the mental piece of the game.
It was weakness then. It was thought of as weakness then.
We never heard you hit it. You never heard that a player had to go into a substance abuse program or a player program. You never heard about it. They just either disappeared because they were just a chess piece. But now there's so much money invested in these athletes and these young men and women that we have to make sure that they're having an end result that is a positive result. So why, to Lee's point, why aren't we doing this with 6-year-olds if our end result wants to be to have a great 23-year-old?
Well, I do want to add in here too, Riley, before you answer that. Look, there's also a lot of fear. I do think the tide has changed. The need for mental fitness within hockey programs, I'm seeing a lot of heads turning now, thinking kind of from a corporate standpoint, oh, this is a way we could stand out from the group. But I'm also seeing acceptance of it, of like, this is important. The big challenge I'm seeing, Mike, to your point, is A, they don't know how to do it, or B, and this is real talk, right? There's fear because people, it's tough to change. And sometimes people don't want you to get a closer look at their psyche because there's not a lot of positive things going on up there. And if you start teaching their kids that, they're going to inevitably go to them. But that's also the point, right? Is to kind of flip that of mental fitness is not a side thing. It is extremely important. I always use the metaphor. You know what happens if you go lift weights or go to the gym. You know what happens if you stop. You're in shape or out of shape. Your brain is very similar. Your mind is very similar. If I'm very mindful and I'm doing the reps that I was talking about and I just stop, bad things are going to start happening. It's not mental health, mental fitness is not something you achieve, right? It's not something you just get and you got it. It's something you work at every day. And if you're lucky, you can do it the rest of your life. All right. I mean, it's just like, it's one of those things. There's no end to it, right? It's an infinite game. And again, the prioritization of it, when we're talking about the ROI of youth hockey, right? If for the parents listening, the ROI is that you're and Riley, we've all said this. Everyone has said this on the show at some point. It is a vehicle for your kid's growth as a person. You're trying to make a better person. Better people make better hockey players. Right? If we go at this only thinking about college scholarships or junior hockey or pro hockey, I mean, look, if you achieve that, great. But man, you've missed a lot if you achieve that without the stuff we're talking about. Right, Riley? I'll throw it to you, bud.
Yeah.
I have one more question for Riley. I was wondering if you could dive a little deeper with us and give us some specific examples of the difference that kind of mental health training made, either in the individual or with the team.
That's a great question.
So that we have some really good takeaways and have a better understanding of why this is so important. If you could share some examples for us of the difference it made.
Yeah, for sure. And it takes time, right? Like any other skill, something that's foreign to you is not going to naturally, maybe you're not going to see results very quickly, but you also can if you really believe in it and actually subscribe to it. But it's just like anything, like we're talking about, it has to be cultivated, right? It's just like you can't just be a one-time thing or just a thought, right? You can't
we
just
had a pizza party today.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, right? Like there's a lot of buzzwords being thrown around, right? Like I think you hear a lot of mindset. People are kind of backdooring this work with just mindset, which is great, right? It's still in the same direction, except for the way I see mindset is just like one pillar in the mindfulness program, right? It's like mindset is one piece, but like you could talk about mindset all day long, but if you're not practicing how to get there, or you're not practicing the actually art of shifting the mind in challenging situations, it's no different than yelling at your child to focus but never teaching him how to focus, right? It's like, well, yeah, focus. Well, if you just take for granted he knows how to focus, but there's actually a lot of different exercises you could do that would support that and train that, versus just like just them learning organically how to focus based on their traditional education. But I think the biggest thing that I see with this is kids' ability to retain focus longer and their ability to self-regulate quicker, meaning that like when life or a situation on ice gets stressful or frustrating, that they're not losing their shit right away, right? And I think it seems to be pretty consistent, and they come hand in hand, is because the more present we become, the more enjoyable the experience is. The game is more fun when you're enjoying it, you're present in it. And then when you turn the puck over, you have a bad shift or goal, you get scored on and whatnot, like it just doesn't seem like it bothers you as much over time, right? And I think that's the goal, and then you're able to come to the bench, take a breath versus overreacting. So now the recovery time is shorter. There's all these different things that go into it. Now we're able to decompress and relax a little bit, reflect maybe on the mistake and refocus, and then go on the ice. And then now it's like talk about mindset. Okay, well, instead of getting mad at my teammate or myself or the coach, now I'm able to reframe and just, again, going back to that self-talk piece, it's like I'm going out this next shift and I'm going to be an impact player, whatever I am, followed up with like something positive. And then, then it's kind of complete. That cycle is complete versus like the energy is all over the place. We're coming to the bench, breaking stuff, shooting water, blah, blah, blah. And then the next shift comes back up and we're not ready. We're not present. We're not ready to go. And then therefore the next shift is probably more of a disaster than the last one, and then the cycle continues. So I would say that I see, and I see it pretty consistently in a pretty short amount of time. In fact, in the summer, I did this like summer camp. It's called Socky Hockey. They get these little sleeves they put on they put on their sticks, and it's like an after school intramural program. And it was a week long, and I went there, and these kids were first and second grade, and I do rhythmic mindfulness, so I bring in drums, right? So the interesting way of teaching present moment is drumming, right? I mean, there's science supports it, history supports it, in training the brain, team building. But you got first and second graders that never held a drum, never heard a rhythm or never tapped the rhythm from the first day to to the fifth day. And a lot of these kids, you could tell, like borderline ADHD right away. Like, right away, like the drums are on their heads, like upside down, But by the fifth day, you could see in just 5 days, like how focused kids can actually get by just bringing some awareness to it, but giving them something enjoyable. I think is the key here. Is like, I'm not teaching them sitting meditation like a Buddhist monk. That would never happen. But you get them in a circle with a drum. It's enjoyable. There's a connection piece. There's a communication piece. A community piece. All of a sudden, without even having to say it or talk about the science and the history, they feel it. And I think that's the key here is like they feel the presence. It forces them into presence.
Right.
It's enjoyable. There's a creative expression there. It's positive creative expression. And in 5 days, you can see like from day 1 to day 5 how much more focused even the most unfocused kid was. He was actually engaging in it. So. That's just again in a small group size in a small amount of time. But now this year I'm excited because I got a full hockey season to work with these different populations that I'm going to be at least once a week, if not twice a week. And you're going to see, the watering of the seeds, and then all of a sudden you're going to see in a 9-month, span. I'd like to think some incredible improvements around their focus, concentration, ability to self-regulate, and beyond. So
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed that.
You will definitely see improvements too. I love that you brought up ADHD because we throw that word around like a crutch.
Yeah.
That kid's got ADHD.
Oh yeah,
well,
right.
Okay, well, what are we doing to help the kid? Like,
Give him more sugar.
Yeah, right.
Give him more sugar and less attention.
Give him the tablet. He likes the tablet.
Exactly.
It just takes work. Another thing, Riley, too, you were talking about just kind of emotions. It was actually my brother said this phrase to my niece, and it really made sense. And I started applying it to the game. And it was that kids don't always realize that the feelings that they're feeling will end. Like there's an end to it. It doesn't last forever. And this could be elation. It could be devastation. What you're feeling, it will not feel like that forever. I mean, there might be remnants of it, but it doesn't last forever. Kids don't tend to realize that. They think that what they're feeling is going to be it forever.
Yeah.
Right. So I've started telling the kids that, like, hey, it's not going to last forever. You got to breathe. You got to get present. Let's talk a little bit. The other thing too is, and I'd love your take on this too, the acknowledgement of the things that you've said, feelings, or that you're not present. There is so much power grabbed when you acknowledge what's going on. When you say, you said earlier in the show, I'm talking negatively to myself. Just saying that, even in your head, gives you so much power over that emotion or that situation. That's another thing we try and practice is having, and we do this with adults too, express to me what you're feeling and say it out loud. Well, I'm mad. Good. I want you to say that. I want you to acknowledge the feeling because now you will have some control over that. It's just if we're talking tips, right? I think that that's something that every parent, every coach can do. I'm not saying, hey, shut up down there, sit down on the bench and shut up. Like that's not going to help. But you have to help these kids acknowledge what are you feeling right now, and it's a little different than saying, hey, I know you're mad.
Yeah,
No,
right.
ask them, what are you feeling right now? And it's funny because a lot of times they won't be able to tell you. They don't know. They're not that in touch with their emotions yet. I do love the rhythmic drumming though. That's that's a new one I'm gonna have to look into.
Yeah, really, it's powerful. It's powerful because I in some of the other work I do outside of youth hockey and mindfulness is really around altered states of consciousness, right? It's finding more creative ways to get people present and in tune with their emotions. It's all connected, right? We grew up in a culture we suppress emotions, right? You have feelings. Oh, we got to suppress those, like you said earlier, like tough it out culture, right? And it's like that's a hairy line to be riding when you talk about suppressing emotions, because they're going to come out. They're designed to come out and express in one way, shape, or form. So if you got emotions that are being bottled up, expect them to come out when you least expect them. So I think that, to what you're saying, is important and super healthy. That would never been a thing back in the day. Oh, hey Johnny, how are you feeling? This, it's like, basically it was just like push that kid to the side because he's, he's not bringing his A attitude. Yeah, call him soft. Exactly. Yeah. So that's super important, and that needs to happen, because I'm, in the belief system is that feelings are the most important thing we have. Like that is the spiritual compass. If we're not following your heart, like every spiritual text talks about, right, is like following your heart. It's like it's almost like a navigation system. There's discord if we're not present and in a higher vibration now, or like in the future worrying, there's discord. And those are just the body's ways to remind us to be back present and find these happier versions of ourselves. Because if you ask every person on the planet, like, if you had list 3 things that you'd like to, accomplish in this lifetime, I'd like to think that most people in the top 3 would be like find happiness, right? And happiness can't be found outside of ourselves. There's things that can make us quote unquote happier in the moment. Maybe that's pleasure and be confused as happiness, but like the reality is happiness is an inside job. It has to be cultivated from within. And that's why the arts exist. That's why people, there's the healing arts and all this stuff is like, you have to be able to express emotion through something. And then you can express emotion through hockey, right? Skill and composure and poise. And you look at myself, and when I played pro hockey, I was expressing myself, not knowing it at the time, but I was expressing myself, obviously, in a violent way, but like there was fear bodies. Now that I'm able to kind of understand my psychology, I was fighting out of fear. I was fighting out of fear of failure, feeling myself down, my parents down. So it was coming from a negative energy, even though like people praised it, the hockey coach, oh yeah, you're a fighter. And some fight fans like love it. But like, I'm looking back, it's like, that's a negative form of self-expression if I ever saw one. It's like, but it's got to come out. It's going to come out in some way, shape, or form. So I think, just the feelings, like just that emotional intelligence that we can teach is like not just burying it. It's like sitting with that. Like you said, like sadness. Okay, let's sit with that. Maybe there's lots to learn in that feeling. It's not to just push it away and it's going to come back double time and next week, and then you're going to overreact because someone's going to say something that's going to trigger you, and then you're going to find yourself having to apologize and blah blah blah. So being in touch with their emotions to me is like is probably the most important thing, because when you talk about mindfulness, part of like thoughts coming through the monkey mind is like we don't have to emotionalize every thought, right? A lot of these thoughts that come through are not even ours and or don't really require or deserve
thinking
or emotion at all. But once we start emotionalizing the thoughts, little Joey said this about me and it makes my heart. Now, if you believe that to be true, well, now all of a sudden your emotional body gets affected. Oh, now we lower a vibration because little Joey thinks that little Tony said something bad about him. You know what I mean? It's like now all of a sudden, like verses be like, that's just a story. That's not true. It's just a thought. Letting that pass. So we're not letting every thought, everything, affect or riddle our emotional body. But there's some stuff that does. Then we have to be honest with what it is, and talk about it. Otherwise, it's just going to get buried. But positive forms of self-expression. Hockey is one, but there's others right? And hockey is also mixed in with a lot of other baggage that doesn't exactly equate to positive mental health either. So drumming, there's a lot of engaging things of the arts, right? I mean, we kind of throw the arts to people that are granola, but guess what? We're all artistic and we're all creative. And in fact, if more hockey programs infuse the arts and these forms of positive self-expression into them, I would like to think that they're creating better humans, first of all, but also probably more creative hockey players. So I don't know. I mean, because it's just a different way of thinking, processing information.
No, I agree with you 100%, Riley. And sorry, excuse me. This has really been a tremendous episode just about the importance of mindfulness and the importance of how this applies to your journey. I'm not even saying hockey journey right now, that this is a really valuable part of just growing up. And then once you're quote unquote grow up, even though I say don't grow up, it's a trap, continuing to do it. And the earlier we can teach this, along with eating healthy and taking care of your body and building skill sets, the creativity of mental fitness, and that the fruits that it provide are so much more valuable than I think some of the other things I just spoke about. So I want to thank you for sharing all of this. And moreover, thank you for the work that you're doing, because you really are impacting lives. When you started this journey, like you said, I think there were people that were, oh, this is psychobabble, Riley's going crazy. And now we're at a point that, people do not look at you like that. And it's really wonderful. They're saying, no, he's figured this out and he wants to share it and we need to hear it. I'm wishing you all the success on that journey, man, because the community really needs it. And you are really a flag bearer and ambassador for that side of the game.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words, and I love what you guys are doing. So if I can ever be of service to you guys, I know this work is obviously important and it's never going to stop, right? We haven't even scratched the surface. So if I can ever help you guys out in some way, shape, or form, amplify, the message, let me know.
Well, you're doing it right now, man.
Yeah, we can do it again if you ever need a guest. So
we will take you up on that. Be careful, man. We might become a weekly thing if you're not careful. But listen, that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I want to thank Riley Cote for being on here today. Christy Casciano Burns, Mike Benelli, best two line mates on the planet. Remember, you can always text us following the link that accompanies this episode, or email us, team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. But above all, be mindful, be present, enjoy your hockey, enjoy it, have fun. You're more than just a hockey player, my friends. That's it for this episode. Skate on. We'll see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.